Hey everybody, this is Paige from Mosaic Moments, and today I am doing a demo on the bricks die. So as you can see, I'm going to grab it right here. This die has multiple 1x2 blocks, and they are attached together, so do not try to separate this die. This is one of the few dies you do not have to cut the pieces individually, so just so you know, it's all attached. And the idea here, and of course it's in the name, is that you can create a brick design with this die. So it's a similar concept to the mosaic dies, so you create the 1-inch mosaics with that one, but with this one you create a brick design instead. And today I'm going to keep it simple. I have two photographs here of leaves. I do recommend trying it out at the beginning with photos like this or paper that's pretty easy to blend, and then later on you can try out doing landscape panoramas. So for now I'm going to keep it pretty easy, and now that you've been introduced to die, let's go ahead and get started. So today I'm using the Sizzix Big Shot die machine, and for my page design, I only really need 3 rows of the brick die, but I wanted to show you that you can fit this on a 4x6 photograph, so you don't need to print a 5x7 or anything like that. But it will be a tight cut. It's the same thing with our grid die. It is very tight. So you just want to take your time, and the key is to line up your photograph on the inside part of the die, because there's the edging of where it's going to cut, and basically you want to line it up right on the edge of the cutting line. So again, just take your time, line it up carefully right on top of those blades. Like I said, it's going to be a tight cut, and I do recommend using some washi tape to make sure that photograph stays straight on your bricks die. And again, it's going to be a very similar thing with if you're using the Mosaic Moments grid die, it's basically the same thing here. Alright, so I'm checking it out, making sure it all is going to line up okay. And now I'm going to place it on the die machine at an angle. We do recommend placing the dies in at an angle because we find it relieves the pressure from the die machine, and we find that the dies cut better when they're placed in at an angle versus if you put it straight through. And you actually find if you put it straight through, it makes a lot more cranking noises. Alright, so I put it all the way through, and for the most part, so what is nice about the brick die is it doesn't have the little tabs to attach everything like the mosaic grid die. So that is really nice. And I try as best I can to, I see one little part popped out here, but I am do the best I can to keep it all attached together because it is easier to add the glue versus putting it on every separate little piece. And then I like them to stay together to make sure all your pieces are going to be in order when you place it on the grid. Alright, I'm going to do it a second time. This time, to make it easier on myself, I'm just going to cut with the top 3 rows. So if you're only cutting with 2 or 3 of the brick die rows, you don't have to layer your photo in such a tight space, so it makes it much easier. And again, I'm making sure most of my photos are attached, although 2 of them fell out, but I try to keep them in order on the side of my table. Alright, and this time, and when you do less than 4 rows, you kind of have to choose if you want the top or bottom. It doesn't really matter, but this time I thought I would just cut with the 3 bottom rows, so this photo is going to go on the bottom section of my layout. Alright, with the Sizzix machine, definitely make sure the plates are going through straight. Sometimes when you turn the machine, the plates also start turning, so make sure you avoid that so you get a better cut. Alright, I'm just carefully taking my photo out of the brick die, and I'm going to throw away these excess pieces because I don't need those. And I have this little part there, can get it out with tweezers. Alright, so whatever, if you use the top section of the brick or the lower section of the brick, for the second half of the design, you want to make sure you use the same 3 rows again so that it lines up like the brick design properly. So if I had used the top 3 rows, I would have used the top 3 rows again, but I used the bottom 3 rows because I used those three for the first photograph. All right, now I have my photographs and I'm just going to place them on the top of the layout here because that's where I want them to go. So what is nice about these two photographs is they are easy to blend. Blend meaning you can kind of blend them together and they still look like one photograph. I'm not having to piece them, I don't have to piece them together perfectly for them to look good. Any washi tape you have, just you can take it off. Most of the time it comes off pretty easily. And then I'm going to glue each section here. I'm using the Herma Dotto dispenser with Re-positionable glue. It's really handy in case you need to move things around. And I accidentally had my paper move over. And the nice thing about keeping them attached as best you can is, again, the dies will stay in order and it helps you glue them down easier. And when I'm done with this photograph, I do need to keep it because as you can see, I'm going to put this 1x2 one down and there's going to be a 1-inch space next to it. So I am going to save some of the photograph to make sure I can create those 1-inch square spaces. All right, and just take your time. You want to pay attention to what order the brick die is, or each piece of the dies, to make sure you line them up correctly on the grid paper. And when you put it on the grid lines, you want to line them up in that left corner first of the space you want to place it, and then line it up with the rest of the lines you can see. And you want to make sure the entire grid line is covered and you know you have it on straight. And the gaps in between each space should also be the same, or approximately the same width between each block. So again, I'm going to save that little piece of the photograph so I can cut those two little 1-inch squares later. So now I'm going to glue the back of my second photograph here, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to glue the two blocks. And you can just get it in one swipe of the glue here. I know my my paper keeps turning over. All right, so again, you want to make sure they stay in order. And so I'm going to place them on the grid here so I can remember where they need to go. And they do line up next to the previous brick die cut. So just so you're aware when you're using it, the design's supposed to have the continuous 1x2 blocks going across the layout. So you don't need to put anything like 1-inch squares or other size spaces in between, although that is an option if you want to do that. So keep that in mind, especially if you make something like a panorama, to make sure panorama is cut with the idea that these 1x2 blocks are going to continue across the layout. All right, I'm just placing them on the grid carefully, making sure those grid lines are covered, so take your time. And I'm going to keep this excess piece, so make sure you keep the excess pieces so you have the little 1-inch square fillers that'll go on the edges of the design. And as you can see here, I have 1x2, one area of the 1x2 block missing. So earlier I cut the first photograph with all 4 rows of the brick die, and I had 2 other pieces I can use in my design. So that is something to keep in mind, is you want to make sure maybe you actually have at least 1 photograph cut with that die. If you have 4 rows, you going across the whole layout, it usually requires 3 photographs at least to fill in this whole space going across the grid paper. And what I mean is, if you have so on this design I have 3 rows of the brick die, but if you had a layout where you wanted to use all 4 rows of the brick die in your design, you'll probably need to print out 3 photographs to fill in the entire space. So I hope that makes sense, but if not, let me know in the comments below. Right now I'm just filling in my bottom space here with the other 2 photographs. It's pretty much the same steps, and again, I'm going to line up the second photograph with the first one to get the brick look. And as you can see, this page looks really neat already with this brick design. And I'm going to keep the little excess pieces for the 1-inch squares, and I had an extra piece to fill in that last block. Alright, now I need 1-inch squares to fill in the rest of the brick space. So I have a piece of excess photo here, and sometimes there might be enough space where you can fit a 1-inch photo or the 1-inch die easily. I'm going to cut this because it'll make it easier to roll it through the machine. But I have my 1 by 1-inch die here. It comes in set A in the basic bundle. And basically this little piece of photograph fits right inside that blade area. You can see the little, well, maybe you can't see them too well, but it fits right inside that die space there, and I'm just really getting that one side cut off. And so this is something you can do if there's not enough spaces left over in your photograph to, like I said, easily fit in the 1-inch square, but you could have a space left over from cutting the brick dies where it can just fit into that die and you're able to create a 1-inch square. So I'm going to do this several more times and then I'm going to fill in the rest of the space by the bricks. Alright, so here's the layout and here's all my little 1-inch squares. I glued them already. So now I had to just place it next to the other cuts I created with the brick die. So obviously it's really easy. Just take your time and line up the squares along the grid lines. For some reason the 1-inch squares are the hardest ones to keep straight, so make sure you cover those grid lines properly. And as you can see, even though that doesn't match up entirely, in some cases I kind of got the 1-inch squares mixed up. But when you have a photograph like flowers or leaves, you can easily blend it with the other photographs and it still looks like one big photograph. Alright, so this is I'm not done yet, but this is the completed brick die design and it looks amazing. I think you guys will absolutely love the brick die, especially if you really like creating mosaics. So I have a bonus tip for you guys. So this is just a fun tip if your brick die design maybe looks too busy or you want to add journaling. Just now I'm using the 1x2 die from set C, which is the same size as the blocks in the brick die, to cut this piece of cardstock here. So I'm going to do that a few more times. And so this is my layout, and I thought it looked a little busy with 2 rows of leaves, and I wanted more journaling. So what I'm going to do is replace some of these leaf photos, I guess leaf blocks, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to replace some of the blocks with this cardstock that's the same size instead. And so again, this is a good tip if you want a little variety in your layout, if you feel like your photo looks a bit busy. Here I have it. I don't think it would be too busy if I had 1 row of the leaf photographs, but I have 2 sections of it, and it's just the same subject repeating really. So I thought I'd add a little bit of variety on my layout. And I just made it simple. I just got a cardstock that's a little bit of a lighter purple than the photo mats I have on the layout. I'm just placing them in random spots. I didn't want the cardstock to be right next to each other. I wanted to see the the leaf photographs between them, but you could do something like maybe the cardstock part goes diagonally down across your design. So it's really up to you. And I would play around with it, and you can always stick the piece of paper on top before you glue it before deciding on the placement. Alright, now I'm going to fill in these little blocks with journaling, and I'll be back. Alright, this is my completed layout, and I'm so glad I added in these little cardstock blocks because then I was able to tell more about the story about this day. So this is a great way to add journaling if you feel like you need to tell more about the story behind your photographs. So anyway, this is the end of today's demo. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to see more future demos like this one. I think you guys, like I said, if you really love using the mosaic die, I think you'll really love the brick die, so try it out. You'll have a lot of fun. All right. I hope all of you have fun scrapping at home, and I will see you next time.